Island One Company looks forward to seeing you at Matt's in March.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
A U.S. House subcommittee was given a primer earlier this week in some of the hottest issues in the trucking industry, such as truck parking, driver retention, and more. I'll discuss that and the nominee to lead the FMCSA with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Also on today's program, Marty Ellis is in Louisville, Kentucky at the Mid-America Trucking Show, but truckers are still bringing the big issues of the day to his door. Among them is the number of truck rollovers we've had because of recent high wind incidents and the ongoing debate about which is better to improve safety, more technology, or training drivers properly. I'll talk with the man who drives the spirit of the American trucker. But first, the news with Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Mark. The 2025 Mid-America Trucking Show got started on Thursday. News anchor Scott Thompson is there. And before covering the festivities, stopped by the Pro Talks Theater, where the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration held what they called a leadership session. Here's Scott now.
Thanks, Ashley. Anyone expecting big news out of the USDOT or the FMCSA on Thursday left in disappointment. In front of well over 100 people, Ben Segrist, Director of Public Liaison and Senior Advisor at the USDOT, and Jesse Ellison, Chief Counsel for FMCSA, held a fireside chat.
We are definitely entering into a deregulatory environment. If you remember, Trump 1.0 was 2-1, now it's 10-1.
10-1 meaning for every new regulation introduced, 10 must be eliminated. That line garnered applause, but there was no specific mention of which rules and regulations were on the chopping block. There was also no mention of what the authorities are doing to fight back against fraudulent motor carriers, something OOIDA President Todd Spencer noticed. And despite there not being a Q&A period during the session, Spencer called them out.
I was just going to ask what actions FMCSA takes right now when you identify what is a bad actor that has been maybe based in another country that has been given operating authority to operate in the U.S. What actions can you or are you taking now?
In response, the two men on the panel touted upcoming changes to the identification verification system and elimination of motor carrier numbers. Spencer's question, however, wasn't the only one unprompted from the audience. In another, someone wanted to know what FMCSA was doing to enforce its English proficiency requirement and non-domiciled CDLs, a question that led to the biggest applause of the afternoon session. Segrist asked for patience.
You got to give us a little bit of time to get the pieces in place, understanding stuff on a day-to-day basis. But these are issues that are brought to our attention on a daily basis, whether it's from people in this room or otherwise the connectivity we have across the sector.
And that was that. The fireside chat ended shortly after that. As for the English proficiency requirement, OOIDA recently petitioned CVSA to reinstate that requirement, which was removed from its out-of-service criteria in 2015. Much more to come from Louisville and the 2025 Mid-America Trucking Show in the days to come. For Landline Now News, I'm Scott Thompson.
The back and forth on beneficial ownership information has come to an end. Last week, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network submitted an interim final rule that modifies reporting requirements under the Corporate Transparency Act. The rule now exempts all U.S. companies and persons from BOI reporting requirements. The rules, however, are still intact for foreign companies. They are required to file a beneficial ownership information report. The deadline for foreign companies to file a report will be 30 days from March 26th, when the interim final rule was published. Comments are due May 27th. The docket number is FinCEN-2025-0001. A New York trucking company owner has been sentenced to 45 months in prison for lying to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Last week, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of New York announced the sentencing of Tony Keurig, who, according to prosecutors, managed a multi-million-dollar trucking company. According to court documents, Keurig went to extensive efforts to avoid having the conditional safety rating assigned to his company, Orange Transportation Services, Inc. carry forward to a new company he established, operating as Dallas Logistics, Inc. Court documents show Keurig used a dozen chameleon carriers to operate his trucking business while concealing the connection between those entities from federal investigators. In addition to the misleading claims, prosecutors allege that Keurig devised a complex scheme by establishing a fake office for the trucking company. He then invited FMCSA to perform a compliance audit at this fraudulent location. A motion picture industry group has asked FMCSA to renew an exemption from the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse requirements. DISA Entertainment Compliance Solutions, formerly known as Motion Picture Compliance Solutions, asked FMCSA for the exemption renewal in a notice published in the Federal Register on Tuesday, March 25th. Specifically, the group wants an exemption from the requirement that an employer must not employ a driver who is subject to drug and alcohol testing until a full query of the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse has been conducted. Instead, DISA Entertainment Compliance Solutions would conduct a limited query of the clearinghouse before one of its member employers hires a driver for a project. If the limited query discovered the driver was in the clearinghouse, the driver would not be allowed to perform safety-sensitive functions until a full query determines that the driver is not prohibited from operating a commercial motor vehicle. Back in 2020, FMCSA granted the group a 5-year exemption that will go until May 28th of this year. In the original exemption request, the group said the motion picture industry employs a pool of 12,000 drivers who work for multiple employers. The group said the requirement to conduct full queries would increase the number of production days and add millions of dollars of increased production costs to operate in the United States. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association opposed the 2020 exemption request, saying that a driver working for multiple employers was a big part of the reason the clearinghouse was created. Some Canadian truck drivers will receive 30 additional days to renew their registration under the International Registration Plan. Earlier this month, IRP service for Ontario carriers shifted from Canada's Ministry of Transportation to Service Ontario. According to the emergency declaration, a grace period is being provided to ensure all carriers with a March 2025 renewal have sufficient time to receive their credentials. For more information on this, you can visit landline.media. And finally, Kenworth has announced it's donating a T680 to the winner of this year's Transition Trucking Driving for Excellence Award. Kenworth, Fastport, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation's Hiring Our Heroes initiative have all come together in the search for America's top rookie military veteran driver who successfully transitioned to the trucking industry following military service. In order to be considered for the award, a driver must be a legal resident of the U.S., a military veteran, or current or former member of the National Guard or Reserves, hold a valid CDL, have been employed by any for-hire or private fleet that has pledged to hire veterans, and hired as a CDL driver after January 1st of 2024. Nominations for next year's award open today and go until June 20th. You can visit transitiontrucking.org for details. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Ashley. People at most loading docks do not value truckers' time. That's because they don't have to pay for it. 2 bills in Congress would tackle that problem. The bill is the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers, or Got Truckers Act, H.R. 1962 in the House and S. 893 in the Senate. Call 202-224-3121 or write a letter at fightingfortruckers.com. Next, we'll find out what trucking issues came up at a U.S. House hearing from OOIDA's Jay Grimes. We'll be back in a moment with more of the show. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Protect your diesel engine with Howe's Diesel Defender. Restore vital lubricity, eliminate injector deposits, and boost fuel economy by 5% or more. Power performance protection, all in one. Howe's Diesel Defender, available now.
Firestone's FD694 drive tire for long haul and regional applications now delivers 126,000 more removal miles than the Yokohama TY517 MC2. Contact your Firestone commercial dealer to learn more.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
A U.S. House subcommittee was given a primer earlier this week in some of the hottest issues in the trucking industry, many of which are significant problems or opportunities, but they're problems that can be solved. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Rettig. I'm joined, as always, by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, how are you doing?
Doing well, Mark. Good to be with you.
Well, good to have you here. Let's start with the basics here. What subcommittee? What's the topic of the hearing? Who were the folks speaking to the committee?
Yes, so this was the House Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee on Highways and Transit. The focus of the hearing was America Builds, How Trucking Supports American Communities. And it was really a focus on the subcommittee's efforts to examine key issues concerning the nation's surface transportation programs as the subcommittee, the committee as a whole, works to develop and enact a multi-year surface transportation highway reauthorization bill. Current highway bill will expire towards the end of 2026. So the committee has already started on their work in preparations for that legislation, which is going to be the primary focus for the committee both this year and next. So the hearing yesterday heard from a number of different representatives, primarily from the trucking industry, including Lewie Pugh, Executive Vice President of OOIDA. Also got to hear from the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, representatives from the American Farm Bureau, representative from the Shippers Coalition, and a representative from the Truckload Carriers Association. So some differing viewpoints, to be sure, but I think some also common themes on what the committee needs to address and prioritize in the highway bill. It was a fairly comprehensive discussion that covered a lot of ground, and I think both members of Congress and the general public got to hear what's important for American drivers, the men and women who make their living behind the wheel. And Lewie, I think, did an excellent job of conveying those perspectives.
Well, I know that he did provide some testimony in advance, kind of written testimony, that really covered a laundry list of issues that are on the front burner right now for truckers. But obviously, spoken testimony has to be more brief. So I'm wondering what issues he chose to highlight, let's say, in his opening statement.
Yeah, so at these hearings, you get an opportunity to give a real detailed statement and testimony to the committee, and then you've got about 5 minutes in front of the members of Congress to kind of narrow that down and focus on a few things. And I think Lewie's main point was that this is an opportunity to have a pro-trucker highway bill, but that pro-trucker and pro-trucking are not always synonymous these days. And if you hear about some of these policies that are being touted as being good for the trucking industry, they're primarily designed to fatten the wallets and cover the asses of trucking executives, corporate shareholders, shippers, brokers, and trial lawyers. And all too often, these proposals are prioritizing profits over safety, doubling down on many of the problems that have made careers behind the wheel of a commercial motor vehicle less appealing and sustainable, and make our roads less safe. So rather than kind of doing more of the same in Congress when it comes to some of these proposals, it's time to put the men and women of the trucking industry a vision for a highway bill that supports American workers, enhances supply chain efficiency, and improves highway safety from the ground up by focusing on the most important element of trucking, the millions of hardworking men and women who make their living behind the wheel. And was able to really go into some more details throughout the hearing. But I think that's what it really comes down to. Are we going to continue to promote and enact policies that have been proven not to turn around these troubling trends in crash rates and deteriorating highway safety, and have been shown to increase driver retention, drive folks out of the industry? Or should we, focus on stuff that we know works from the years, the decades, the millions of miles of safe driving experience from the small business truckers, the independent owner operators, the professional drivers out there who I think have a expert knowledge of what works and what doesn't?
Well, let's go over some of those. And I'd like to talk about, first of all, some of those that have the most direct impact on the everyday lives of these truckers. And I know that they were kind of on the list of issues up there. Big one, of course, is truck parking. And I'm curious, this has been something that I think, in a very unusual way, most trucking seems to agree on this topic, and most people in Congress do. Did we see that reflected in the testimony and in the questions earlier this week?
No doubt about it, and that kind of is a bit frustrating that you hear the consensus, I think, from the majority of witnesses on the panel from the hearing, and certainly for most of the members. And this wasn't just yesterday where that's been the case. This is the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, which was once again introduced earlier this year by Congressman Mike Bost from Illinois, who sits on the committee, as well as Congresswoman Angie Craig from Minnesota. But it's been passed in the committee overwhelmingly in a bipartisan fashion, but it's never, for some reason, been able to get the support of House leadership to be able to be enacted into law. So major focus on truck parking safety, alleviating the truck parking shortage has been a top safety concern for American truckers for more than a decade. It really impacts every congressional district, every state in the nation, and a lack of available parking forces truckers to choose between parking in a potentially unsafe location, such as a highway shoulder, or continuing to drive when they feel fatigued or out of available driving hours. And again, heard from witnesses from the truckload carriers, the American Farm Bureau, and International Brotherhood of Teamsters that all echoed those sentiments.
One of the other issues that we talked about a little bit with one of your colleagues before this hearing was the effort to provide truckers bathroom access at shipping and receiving facilities. And I do remember some members of Congress who just expressed shock, really. They were just kind of tipped back to learn that, what do you mean truckers can't go to the bathroom? And, of course, everybody listening to this is well aware of the problem. Did that get some play during this hearing?
It did get a little bit of discussion, specifically from that bill's champion, Congressman Troy Nehls from Texas, who introduced the bill last Congress and is on the verge of reintroducing the legislation once again, which is pretty common sense language that says that when a driver is visiting a shipper's facility, that they're allowed to use the restrooms on site. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, too often drivers are restricted access in some of these locations, have to get back in their truck, find a truck stop, which might not be next door to the shippers, and really is another challenge in a driver's day and an unnecessary one at that. So the new version, which is should mirror previous language, is set to be introduced, and I think certainly something that we hope is going to be another priority in the upcoming highway bill reauthorization.
We also had another moment with Representative Nehls that I kind of liked, and he's done this before, but he held up an issue of Landline magazine, which is, he's done that before in one of these hearings. What was the issue that he kind of used the magazine to illustrate? Yeah,
it was pretty timely. The most recent, the February edition of Landline's magazine this year really looked at what are truckers' priorities in this new Congress. And Mr. Nehls, to his credit, kind of held up the copy of the magazine, wanted to submit it for the hearing record. Page 48. If you need a quick summary from our nation's truckers' priority, look right there. Page 48, Landline magazine, all the priorities. So that was great to hear from Mr. Nehls. He also spoke to the need about truck parking. mentioned that, we find money for all things in Washington, find a lot of ways to waste a lot of money in Washington. We should be able to find funding for truck parking. He also took a shot at speed limiters and wanted to take a moment, and he said to formally attack and express my disdain for the awful policy of truck limiters. Speed limiters hurt our small and independent truckers. And it's a dangerous idea that can manifest itself with risky driving. Hears from truckers going into his office all the time that the consensus is it's a horrible idea and that it's an anti-American big brother nonsense. So Mr. Nels was not shy about really speaking up for truckers today with more restroom access, more truck parking. But let's not waste our time with this idea of an across-the-board speed limiter mandate.
I could go through a whole list of these other issues that we were kind of expecting to come up to ask you about, but I'm wondering if you can just give us 2 or 3 examples of other issues that did come up during this hearing that would be of interest to some of the truckers out there listening.
Yeah, another major theme, driver retention, which really, kind of speaks to, truck parking, lack of bathroom access. We need to find ways to keep drivers within the industry. There's been this debate that, there's not enough drivers who want to enter the industry. We've got a big driver shortage. Well, no, when you look at the data, when you look at the economic analysis, there's no driver shortage. It's a turnover and retention problem. Lewie kind of spoke to the fact that large carriers have 90%, sometimes more, annual turnover. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we've got to start fixing that to not only make trucking a more sustainable long-term career, but that experience is going to lead to improved safety undoubtedly. So many members asked about how to improve driver retention. Is this really a shortage problem? Are there bigger issues at play here?
I'm curious, you mentioned earlier the highway bill. And obviously, that's a big piece of legislation that comes up just every few years. But one of the things that we talk about is how important it is to have some of these issues addressed in that bill. I think, Jay, that a lot of people have this image of Congress that we learned about in school, that someone brings up a bill on a topic, you go to the House, you go to the Senate, it goes to the president, the schoolhouse rock model, I guess. Right. But why is it important these days in particular, here in the minute we have left or so, to get these issues into the highway bill?
Because that's going to be the most efficient and best chances of it to get actually enacted to law. You mentioned the schoolhouse rock. In theory, the highway bill, it's not really just one bill. It's going to be thousands of different legislative provisions. And the highway bill reauthorization process is to get a lot of these individual policies wrapped up in one big package that increases its chances of success, kind of given the dynamics and state of play in modern Washington. Very rarely does one individual bill get enacted by itself. You've got to have kind of a lot of stuff packaged together for a lot of different reasons. So that's the real critical importance for this highway bill process that's going to take place over the next couple of years.
Okay. Well, Jay, if you don't mind sticking around, there's a few other issues because it's been a busy week. You mind coming back and joining us after the commercial break?
Let's do it.
Okay. I've been talking with Jay Grimes of OOIDA. Landline Now will be back in a moment.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a cat scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget misaccuracy when you're truck on a cat scale.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
Landline Now. Welcome back. You're listening today to an extended edition of Regulatory Roundup because this has been a very, very busy week for trucking in the nation's capital. I've been talking with Jay Grimes, OOIDA's Director of Federal Affairs, and one of the other things that happened this week that's very important for trucking, the Trump administration announced their pick to lead the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. So, Jay, let's start with the basics once again. Who is it, and what can you tell us about the nominee to head FMCSA?
Yes, the nominee's name is Derek Bars. He's a former Florida Highway Patrol chief, has more than 3 decades of experience in law enforcement, and he's the pick. And OOIDA has some background with him. I know he was very active in CVSA, had a prominent role working with CVA's association membership, which OOIDA is a part of. Congratulated Mr. Bars on his nomination. Look forward to working with him and advancing the priorities of small business truckers, including fighting freight fraud, rolling back so many burdensome and unnecessary regulations, and then at the same time closing regulatory loopholes to ensure the safest drivers remain in the industry. We're hopeful that the confirmation process will be swift in the Senate, and certainly look forward to working with Mr. Bars to improve the safety of our roadways. So generally, along with a couple of other nominees announced this week, all the modal administrators under DOT, which is quite a few, have all been nominated. But we have not really begun to kind of start their formal confirmation process. So that's going to be the next step here. At some point, Mr. Bars will appear before the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. He will undergo questions from members of that committee. We'll get to learn more about his priorities, what his vision for the agency will be. The committee shortly after will then take a vote on his confirmation, and then it eventually has to be approved by the full Senate before he can really get into DOT and start in his role. So we'll kind of wait and see when that confirmation process will formally begin. But now that he's been nominated, now that all these other positions have been nominated, I would expect that Senate Commerce Committee to start scheduling some of these hearings in the next few weeks.
And it seems to me, Jay, that the Trump administration is moving pretty quickly in comparison with recent years to fill these positions. Am I off on that?
No, I think you're right. So under DOT, you've got federal aviation, you've got federal rail, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Federal Highway, and a couple others beyond that. And I think a couple of those nominees were named right away within the first couple of weeks, and now rounding out the roster here about 60 days is pretty good pace. Looking back, I think it took a little bit longer time for Mira Zoshi to get nominated in the first few months of the Biden administration, and same thing for Ray Martinez at the first opening of the Trump administration in 2017. Unfortunately, the problem with this position is that it seems to be a constantly revolving door. So as we kind of learn more about Mr. Bars, as we kind of get to hear what his priorities are going to be, one of the critical things I think we'd like to see is a commitment to the industry to really stay out the length of his term, if possible, because each change in this position kind of in some ways restarts the process on a few different issues. So that's going to be a critical thing to watch. Certainly going to have some other specific policies we're going to want to hear from him, most notably getting rid of this misguided speed limiter mandate that's still kind of floating around FMCSA for the last couple of years, unfortunately. And I know there's going to be a lot more to get to in his law enforcement background and how he's going to balance that versus the driving side of things. So we'll kind of wait and see for the hearing to be scheduled. And I think certainly, again, as you mentioned, the timing from the administration, I think, is an indication they want to get these positions filled and start getting to work.
It's interesting you mentioned kind of the revolving door that we've seen in that position. I was looking recently at a list someone had compiled of all the various administrators since the FMCSA came into being. And for the first few, it's full-time Senate confirmed, one after the other. And then a few years back, it kind of broke down, and we have a lot of acting administrators. And we've talked about this before, Jay, but I think it's worth mentioning again why it's important to have someone who is, for lack of a better term, a full-time Senate-confirmed administrator instead of an acting one. I mean, why is that a thing that's meaningful?
Yeah, if you get that Senate confirmation, you've got clear indication that the legislative branch is supporting the leadership at FMCSA, which echoes the executive branch for nominating that individual. So I think it helps in kind of cutting through some of the bureaucracy. It ensures that there's some clear leadership, a clear vision that's trying to be implemented at the agency level. There are also some other authorities that being fully confirmed by the Senate affords the position too. So it's always critical to have someone get that Senate confirmation to provide some stability to kind of help things move as best they can. It's never fast at DOT and FMCSA. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's not so good. But I do think it's always critical to have someone who's been confirmed as FMCSA administrator to kind of carry out the work. And hopefully they can do that in a successful and efficient way. And I think, again, we're going to find out exactly how that's going to be carried out under Mr. Barr's potential leadership.
Something else that you mentioned earlier was this concept of rolling back some of the regulations that just aren't working. And that is certainly something that we saw attempted and to an extent carried out in the first Trump administration. Looking at where things are now and kind of how the current administration is going, does it appear that basically we're going to see that same level or a greater level of rollback? Do we have an idea of what regulations might be rolled back?
Yeah, I think all indications are pointing in that direction. I think we're still in this sort of, regulatory review phase where the new DOT leadership that has been confirmed by the Senate, DOT Secretary Sean Duffy, DOT Deputy Secretary Stephen Bradbury are kind of still looking at what needs to go, what needs to stay. I can't imagine that they look at speed limiters and think that this proposal is going to be beneficial to highway safety, is going to have any sort of cost-benefit enhancements. So that's one that we're focused on getting off the books. Certainly a whole host of others in terms of looking at how carriers get in. The barriers to entry into the trucking business right now we think are need to be more stringent. The way that FMCSA, DOT analyzes carriers, how they look at who performs safely, what types of violations, what types of practices are they considering when they review carriers and perform audits and put these safety ratings out. Just a couple to name. Certainly, we want to see improvements on entry-level driver training, which, looking back at the hearing this week, definitely a priority for members of Congress right now as well. So I think we're on the right track. I think we still got some time before we see any official actions and withdrawals or proposals from the new DOT. Certainly, the nomination of Mr. Barr's and hopefully his eventual confirmation can speed that up a little bit as well.
Okay. We have a little over 3 minutes left, Jay, and there was one other thing that I think you and I both wanted to get to, and that is, of course, that at the Mid-America Trucking Show happening this week at the Kentucky Expo Center in Louisville, FMCSA has made a real effort over the past few years to be at that show and to bring some meaningful information to the people who are attending. They've got two particular sessions, and I'm curious if you can tell us, let's start with the one on Friday. Give us some information on that session. What is it about? Who's going to present the information?
Yeah, so obviously, shout out to everyone down in Louisville right now. Big week at the Mid-America Trucking Show. OOIDA is well represented, and so is FMCSA, and they're going to be hosting a couple sessions Friday morning, 10 a.m., the B104 Pro Talks Theater. Going to hear from FMCSA about their plans to modernize the agency's registration system, get some updates there. This has obviously been an ongoing process throughout a number of years to really make this system more user-friendly, more efficient, making sure it's weeding out and eliminating fraudulent and bad actors that continue to plague the industry. I know FMCSA has pointed to 2025 on when they're going to finally launch the program. Nothing has been launched formally yet, but I think we're going to hear some critical updates tomorrow morning from FMCSA at that session. I'm going to host another one on Saturday morning at 10:45 a.m. at B104, talking about crash preventability, data queues, and the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. So some more critical information in those programs as well coming on Saturday.
And that also, 10:45 a.m. to 11:45. Again, that's Saturday. And the room, once again, is B104, which, as I recall, Jay, that's where they really have most of these seminars, educational sessions, and anything like this with FMCSA traditionally there at Matt's.
Yeah, number of educational talks, seminars, a whole host of information, and FMCSA during these sessions, they generally provide an opportunity for drivers, for people attending the show to ask them specifically any questions that they might have. So it's really a great opportunity to hear from FMCSA, give them your input, and really ask them what you want to hear about. And I know FMCSA is going to, has a booth down there at the show as well, where they're looking to meet and talk and hear from drivers as well to kind of get some input on what's working and what's not.
Okay. Well, Jay, thank you very much for all the information. We certainly appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
I've been talking with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. And folks, one other reminder, these two FMCSA sessions are kind of panel discussions or informational sessions. They're basically classes where you can ask some questions of the instructors. These are not listening sessions like they've had at some points in the past. And again, those will take place in room B104. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. Please stay with us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
At Truck Stop, we've built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Capital Reman, the leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, has partnered with OOIDA to offer exclusive member benefits. Visit capitalreman.com today to support America's transportation industry and take advantage of your benefits.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Every week, we check in with Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, the Spirit of the American Trucker. Marty is now in Louisville, but truckers are still bringing the big issues of the day to his door. Among them is the number of truck rollovers we've had because of recent high wind incidents and the ongoing debate about which is better to improve safety, more technology or training drivers properly. I talked with Marty about both issues.
Carolina west to Denver, up to Bangor, west to Austin, coast to coast, sea to sea, sail on, sail on.
Marty, how are you doing?
I am lovely, Mark, and you?
I'm doing great. And I suspect you are basically getting ready for something real big to happen.
We are in Louisville for the Mid-America Truck Show. A lot of beautiful trucks. Get to see some people that you basically see once a year. So should be a really good time, and hope to see a lot of our members and then, of course, our future members as we go along.
There you go. And it's going to be a heck of a good time. I'm sure it always is.
Yeah, it's the 27th through the 29th, and we'll have a whole mess of people from the office coming. Lewie will be here for a while, so will Todd. And then a few of the people in different parts of the office there. So if you have any questions or things like that, don't hesitate to find us at booth 20035 or out here at the Spirit with me. And we're parked basically right in front of the West Wing Hall doorway.
Excellent. Hey, all right. Well, let's talk about some of the stuff coming up. And the first topic you mentioned before we started our conversation here is some of these things we've been seeing. We've had a lot of heavy-duty wind events in different parts of the country. And, of course, you get online and inevitably you're going to see a video of some trucker whose rig just falls over and rolls over. How often are you seeing that or hearing about it, Marty?
Yeah, it's actually I had one of our members talk to me about it. And, of course, I see the same things on social media and that. But I really do believe in the last, I'd say 20 years, the wind seems like it's getting worse and worse. Now, I'm not a, weather guru, but it just seems that way. And not just windier, but I mean like crazy wind where it can blow over empty trucks especially. I think it was not this last January, but the January before, there was an empty trailer unhooked from a tractor up there on Wheeler Ridge in California that blew over right there in the parking lot. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're safe anywhere. But one of the things our life member had mentioned was when he sees these videos online that he notices that almost all of the ones that were blown over have their trailer axles slid all the way up. And I've always, and I don't know why I did it. I guess, I don't know. It was just instinctual. I don't know, but I've always moved my axles all the way back in heavy wind and sometimes in more, snow and winter. And it's, especially in the wind, it just seems like it stabilizes it more. And I actually had a friend call me up the other day, and he was talking to me about the wind, and he's had two rollovers himself. And so he's pretty gun shy about any kind of weather. And I said, well, just, slide your axles all the way back on your trailer. And he says, well, yeah, but in this state, it's, you're supposed to not have it all the way back. And I said, you know what? If I have to choose between feeling safer and dealing with a cop if he thinks he's got to make a big issue of it, then I guess I will do that. But especially where he was at, I didn't figure anybody was going to mess with him. But you never know, so don't take my word for it. But, I think California is about the biggest one that will fuss about that. But, I think they would also look at that and say, hey, you might be right.
Well, I know I've seen some of the folks that just do an amazing job of saving it when the truck begins that rollover. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what I see them doing is they're turning into the direction of the rollover, right?
Yeah, they are. And then there a lot of times, and that's one of the things that Jerry brought up was that, that some of the time, if you are going at a reasonable slow speed, and you should be going the slower speeds in this high wind, you can sometimes power your way out of it. And that's the way, we've always felt about the speed limiters, and that you want to be able to have some ability to be able to either speed up to get out of a problem, or in that case, power out of it and try to save it, because some of the time you just can't. But there are different things you can try to save it.
Absolutely. Well, let's real quick talk about one other topic of the time we have left here. And this is one that we've talked about a lot over the years, but this whole kind of ongoing struggle between which is better for solving problems in trucking, which is technology and more technology, or just training drivers better. And I bet I know where you're going to fall on that one, Marty.
Yeah, I just, it got brought up the other day. I was watching something online or listening to something online, and the regulator, that's all they could think of and say out loud was, we need, more of this technology to try to prevent wrecks and all. And I don't understand how they cannot look at that and say, look, at some point in time, if we don't train these guys, I don't care how much technology you put on a truck, you're still going to have issues. These guys need to know what to do in certain circumstances. And granted, nothing's 100%. So we're going to have issues out here on the road, but the better trained, the more training that these drivers can get, the better. And if you want to go through a quick school to get your CDL, all they're doing is training you to pass that test. But you need some finishing time. And that's, some companies put you in with a trainer for a little while. The problem is with the trainers nowadays, the reason that they're agreeing to be a trainer is because they can get more miles in, because you basically run that truck as a team. And I have never quite understood how you can train somebody from the sleeper. And to me, if you are that good, you know what? I need to start up a trucking company and I need to hire you, because if you can train somebody while you're laying in bed sleeping, I want you as one of my drivers.
Yeah, I guess there's some subliminal messaging involved there. Something like that. I don't know. I have always believed, always, that the better option, and probably in the long term, the more cost-effective option overall, is just training people. But I also know that there's some large carriers that think I can buy this technology once, or I can pay a driver more because since they're trained, they're worth more. And they just don't want to pay people money. That's really what it comes down to. And honestly, a lot of carriers, if their labor costs go up, even if they make more profit, a lot of the Wall Street firms will downgrade their rating of their stock just for having higher labor costs. It's really awful.
Right, and it is. And I agree. I think that if they would look at it a little harder, that they would realize that training is the answer. And I get it. A lot of these lawyers have put all this, oh my gosh, if you didn't have the new technology, you would have saved somebody's life. It's not necessarily true. Let's just train these drivers.
There you go. Well, Marty, unfortunately, we've run out of time here. Any final words before you ride off into the sunset?
Hey, guys, just be kind to one another and give that driver next to you a break.
Brothers of the highway, children of the wind.
Once again, that was Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker. You can find Marty's next stop on our show and every day at our website, landlinenow.com. That's our program for today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
My kids.
chrome.
And I am
I am.
a professional truck driver.
And together, we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us.
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.